Salve, Suso Christo, glory to Jesus Christ. This is your host, Christopher, and welcome to episode 8 of the podcast, the Ukrainian Fire Chaplain Show. We have an awesome episode for you today with a very evocative title called Theologians and Clowns. And if you look at the picture, no, I'm not calling Benedict, late Pope Emeritus Benedict, a clown. But I am getting into him talking about the relationship that theologians do have with clowns in a work that he wrote back as a very young priest called Introduction to Christianity. So stick with us. We're going to get into that today and figure out what exactly the relationship is between people who speak about God and the circus. If you haven't already, check out our website, www.theufcshow.com. This episode and our episodes are on YouTube and various podcast platforms. You can also go to our website under the header Catechism and find out more about our forthcoming study series, reading, reflection, and study series on the Ukrainian Catholic Catechism. That is going to be a 33-week-long daily reading and study of the Catechism of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. It's an awesome series that we hope to have coming out in sometime in May, and I hope you check those out. But let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Theologians and Clowns. So we have an interesting quote, and I'm going to skip down and read a little bit of it from his work, Introduction to Christianity. And I know I have quoted from Ratzinger before, particularly in the rabbi putting it all out on the table and his debate with the Enlightenment philosopher. And what I'm going to get in today is the scandal that theology has to the world, the scandal that the theologian has to the world. And if you have not already, you could check out our interview with Matthew Minard, where we do kind of talk about this quote later in the episode, specifically as it relates to the struggle of Eastern Catholic seminarians today. But without pointing the finger at myself as a theologian, what are we talking about here? One of the things that a Christian struggles with in our contemporary society, which is in decline in various ways, is that we have this huge difficulty of being able to speak in a way that is received. You know, in the Christian tradition, there's that beautiful introduction to John's Gospel where it talked about, and the world could comprehend it not, or the world could not grasp the word. The world could not grasp him. And there's some truth there, and that's kind of like the biblical indication of what we're talking about. The putting into God, or the putting into words of God and the things of God, is very difficult. I don't want to say it's quite like a fish that's slipping out of your hand, or like, trying to skate on ice without skates and you're just out there in your socks and you're slipping and sliding around. But there's this huge difficulty that we have to admit that we have when we're interacting with people, because we don't live in a Christian culture, and we definitely do not live in any semblance of a Catholic culture, and much of Protestant culture has been long gone in the 20th century, from its American roots back in the 1800s here. So without being really a fatalist, we're like the Romans in the time of the Augustine, and, the barbarians are begging at the gates, and, we're all getting ready to collapse into this modern neo-dark age, without being a complete fatalist. And in a certain sense, intellectually, we do live there. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that we as Christians not only are in words removed from society, we are philosophically, culturally very removed from society. You think of a lot of modern forms of entertainment and pornography that are just like, yes, pornography that's in the movies. Well, it's just a little bit of nudity, and that's probably more like pornography in some of the movies that are out there today. But the Christian citizen really finds himself as an anomaly. While there are some, amazing patriots that love Americanism and love constitutionalism, and there are a lot of Marxists that are advocates for a neo-nationalism, a neo-communism, a neo-socialism, in various forms, we Catholics and Christians don't really have an organization to identify with besides the church And oftentimes identifying with our local parish, or identifying with our bishop, or identifying with our church at large, particularly in the West, can be kind of a struggle. That's just to recognize that for the past 50 years, especially, not necessarily coinciding with Vatican II, but culturally coinciding with a lot of things that went on in the post-war periods after World War II in the West, which are very different from the struggles of the Ukrainian church and some of the struggles of the Eastern churches, but just generally modern American struggles. There's been a huge identity crisis of what does it mean to be a Christian? What is the identity of the Christian church? So as I mentioned, the passion of the passage of Theologians and Clowns that we're going to get at was from Ratzinger's Introduction to Christianity, and I'm going to read a couple quotes from that. Anyone who tries today to talk about the question of the Christian faith in the presence of people who are not thoroughly at home with church language soon comes to sense the alienating nature of such an enterprise. This person will probably have the feeling that his position is only too well summed up in Kierkegaard's famous story of the clown in the burning village, which was an allegory that has been taken up again recently by Harvey Cox in his book Secular City, which Benedict was talking about, reference to the culture at his time period when this was written back in the 50s, 60s. According to the story, a traveling circus in Denmark caught on fire. The manager sent the clown, who was already dressed up, made for the performance, into the neighboring village to get help, especially because there was a danger that the fire would spread across the fields and engulf the entire village itself. So the clown, I'm going to go ahead and paraphrase some of the stuff. The clown hurries over there, and everybody says, "Oh, great, look at the entertainment. Oh, this is part of the show." He's saying there's a fire coming, and we're all going to die, and we're all going to burn up, and everything in the world's going to be over. Oh, this is a great entertainment. And so like the clown begins getting frustrated because these people aren't taking him seriously. Didn't he kind of anticipate that? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud to myself, maybe taking that extra 5 minutes to kind of get out of that and de-clown a little bit. Anyway, well, messaging is huge. Taking that, setting the stage, the clown missed all of that. And so they thought it was part of the performance, and they applauded him so much that everybody was crying in laughter. They thought it was a great performance. And then the clown, Ratzinger writes, quote, the clown felt more and more like weeping than laughing because he tried in vain to get these people to be serious, to make it clear that this wasn't a stunt. He wasn't pretending. But that only got them riled up further. And ultimately the fire engulfed the village and everything was destroyed. And circus and village burned to the ground. How often do we feel like that? Sometimes trying to talk with non-Christians or fallen away Christians, or with agnostics or atheists, where they're just looking at you kind of like, you're out in left field, and you're just sitting back going like, no, I'm just talking about, some semblance of order in creation, or that there is such a thing as creation. We can't explain ourselves. And there's just this like dumbfounded look. Why? Well, we have to recognize that disparity between our language, our worldview, and theirs. So Ratzinger continues, I'm going to paraphrase some of this, where this story is an analogy of our position as Christians today. The theologian is the clown who can't really make people listen to his message. It's medieval, it's old-fashioned, it's a clown costume, it's irrelevant. You can kind of find this in the terrible, horrible cultural Ali G interviews with religious figures, kind of like some very dark satire to the. You can find this when people like Bill Maher have had people on his show, and it's just this dark, very dark humor. Not even like good dark humor, but just some very fatalistic stuff. So the clown is basically impossible to be taken seriously. No matter what he says, he's put in a box, and based on his appearance, his understanding, and once the listeners have put him in the box, there's no way for him to get out. That's where they've put him in their mind, and he can go nowhere else. Anything that he does to try to demonstrate seriousness just furthers the conviction that he's just a great actor and a great clown. The other challenge is that people will, listen to, I can't really say listen. They'll hear without hearing. They'll listen without listening. They'll listen without real attention to him quite happily as a form of entertainment. And how easy is that for us to go to church? How easy is that for us to hear the gospel about, oh yeah, Jesus sang all these things, and any man who looks lust, on another, on a woman with lust commits adultery. So yeah, that's a good saying. Are we doing that ourselves? Do we, put Jesus by putting his preachers in that box? Say, we don't have to take it too seriously. The other interesting thing in this final quote that I have from Ratzinger is that there's some truth to this. And this last quote, this picture contains an element of truth in it. It reflects the oppressive reality in which theology and the theological discussion are imprisoned today, and the frustrating inability to break through accepted patterns of thought and speech. The other interesting thing that Ratzinger kind of goes on with this series and this episode is that there really is some truth to this. And the truth to it is that the clown, while removed, does have these attributes. But the falseness of this story, one of the ways in which this analogy of the clown breaks down, and Ratzinger gets into this, and I recommend you take a look at the book. I've got links in the description if you can get it through one of our Amazon affiliate accounts. If you look at that, one of the things where this is an imperfect analogy that Ratzinger also points out is that the clown actually in the real world does have similar relationships. And so one of the interesting things where people would say, well, you're Christians, you have all this language, you're completely other than this. We want to put you and your theology in this box and write you off. The interesting thing for us is that we have this huge ability that the clown doesn't, to relate to the real world circumstances of people out there. I'll give you a great example. When, after my son's cardiac arrest and he was taken to the children's hospital and was in cardiac ICU before and after his surgery, I cannot tell you how many people, nurses, fallen away Catholics, some of them practicing Catholics, very devout Orthodox Jews, very devout Muslims, very devout people who I had no idea what their faith was. I just knew that they were not mine. They didn't share my worldview or my, some of them didn't share my Christian religion. Some didn't share the aspects of the Christian religion that I hold to. But they could relate to me on a very human level. The staff could very clearly relate to me. A lot of them knew that I had worked my own son's cardiac arrest and had helped save him. They could see themselves in my shoes. And there's stories of one of the other kids that was in the ICU at the time who was getting ready to possibly not make it. I don't know, and even if I did, wouldn't talk about it. One of the physicians came up to me afterwards and was like, if you're going to hang out here long enough, I might give you a job. And I'm like, no. I'm like, okay, but I probably don't have the licensure that you would need to work up here in the CICU, the cardiac ICU. But what was interesting is there was this way that we found common ground. They found a way to relate to me because of our professional overlap, even though, I just work pre-hospital EMS and they work in saving children's lives that, and bringing them back from the dead in ways that we can only dream of in the back of the ambulance that we're not trained to do. But what I also could find, there was another couple there that came up and asked me, one of them asked me, said, well, how is this trying you on your faith? And this, that, and the other. And, I responded and I said, look, this has made my faith stronger than it ever has been. And the person was very, confounded by this and said, what do you mean? And I said, look, I've walked into people's houses that are 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, where there's pet feces and urine all over everywhere, to the point where I'm almost having an asthma attack. I don't have asthma, where I'm almost finding it impossible to breathe because the smell is so bad in there. And I've observed in my public safety background that it's not how many years we have on this life, it's what we do with it. what does it matter if you've made it to 55 years old and you went on a shooting spree and killed a bunch of people? Oh, great. Well, you had 55 years, but what did you do with the 55 years? And so I phrased it to him. I said, look, I've only had my son a few weeks, but, it's a blessing. We never thought we'd be able to have kids in the first place. How can I be frustrated at being given just a small gift? Oh, I wish it was more, That's the temptation that the world wants to see. And unfortunately, I did see that in one of the families at the hospital that was just manifestly angry over at the horrible condition that their child was in. And we can relate to this. I can sympathize with that pain and that temptation to loss of a child, because I literally lived through that with myself. And so there is that ability, in spite of us having different worldviews, in spite of this difference of words and the rest of it, there is that ability to find some common ground. And that's where Ratzinger's story about the clown and the theologian breaks down. Because in the real world, we can find that even if somebody is 98% different than our faith, we can find that 2% and try to start building from there. And you find this in the scripture. You'll actually find where when Jesus is debating with the sects that only held to the sects, that is the Jewish sect, that only held to the first 5 books, he doesn't go around quoting from the rest of the books of the Old Testament. He sticks to that. He tries to find that common ground. We should do that as well. And I think that's an important lesson for us in this series, is to see that while we are clowns in one sense, as me as a theologian, me as a Christian, you as a Christian, maybe you as an agnostic, whatever that difference is, while we do have that otherness, we have that common ground as well. And I think that's actually a great topic to get into. And I'm going to put that on the schedule for next week's episode, when it comes to this whole issue and this challenge of the otherness. And what exactly does it mean to be other? So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you've not already, check out our website, theufcshow.com. Please consider following us or subscribing. Click the little bell for notifications. Appreciate your patience with me. We took a couple weeks off there during Christmas and New Year, and I'll have to give a little shout out. Go Dogs. Utterly obliterated TCU. Some of you that aren't fans of UGA, that's fine. I'm kind of a fair weather fan. For me, it's entertainment. It's not a religion like some people, but appreciate you guys sticking with me, and we will see you next week when we get back. This is your host, Christopher. If you like today's episode, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Also, click the bell for notifications on future content. If you haven't already, check out our website, theufcshow.com, ways that you can support us and find us on other platforms. Until next time.